Hi friends, it's your boy Cranberry Enthusiast. Welcome to episode 4 of this completely wild series in which we are reading and studying the book of Daniel in the Old Testament and figuring out what is happening with Daniel and all his friends and enemies and frenemies and whatnot. And anyway, we're in chapter 4 today, as this is episode 4, and we're doing a chapter each day, or one chapter each episode. I'm a little bit, I always say I'm tired. I guess I'm tired all the time, so I guess it makes sense. But I'm still very much getting used to recording videos live like this without scripting things out and making a bunch of edits. So if you would please bear with me, or you can go watch Markiplier play Five Nights at Freddy's or something. Anyway, but thank you all for tuning in, and hopefully this will be fantastic for us all. And so, without further ado, let's get right into Daniel chapter 4. Alright, also, just as a note, the 4th chapter is kind of from the perspective, it's basically written as a letter of King Nebuchadnezzar, who, as you can remember probably from the previous 3 episodes, he's been the main physical antagonist for Daniel and his friends. The king of Babylon, the guy who's kind of ruthless dictator, but he's been learning lessons. And so anyway, so this is essentially, this whole chapter is from his perspective. It's like a letter that he wrote, and let's get right into it here. Nebuchadnezzar, the king of all the peoples, nations, and populations of all languages who live in all the earth, may your peace be great. Here's a fun fact, which you probably already know. Back in ye olden times, people would start out letters by writing their name at the top of it. So that way, when you get a letter from somebody, you automatically know who sends it. You don't have to, turn and to the end of the letter where the signature is. So right here, this is a greeting, and so it's Nebuchadnezzar the king, and so when he is sending this, and if my understanding is right, so Nebuchadnezzar the king, and then he sent this letter is to all the peoples, nations, and populations of all languages, even though Nebuchadnezzar was kind of the king of most of the ancient world back in his day, or in his area. The Babylonian Empire was relatively huge. But so anyway, nice greeting there. May your peace be great. Imagine Nebuchadnezzar wishing that your peace would be great. Let's continue. I am pleased to declare the signs and miracles that the Most High God has done for me. How great are his signs, and how mighty are his miracles. His kingdom is an everlasting kingdom, and his dominion is from generation to generation. And so that's kind of a little, almost like a benediction type thing, which is also a song by Reliant K. Let's continue on. I, Nebuchadnezzar, was at ease in my house and happy in my palace. I saw a dream, and it startled me, and these appearances as I lay on my bed and the visions in my mind kept alarming me. Seems like he's referring back to in chapter 2 with his weird dreams and everything, but anyway, let's continue. So I gave orders to bring into my presence all the wise men of Babylon, so that they might make known to me the interpretation of the dream. Then the soothsayer priests, the sorcerers, the Chaldeans, the diviners came in, and I related the dream to them, but they could not make its interpretation known to me. So this seems like it's a different thing. Nebuchadnezzar just happens to have a ton of very vivid, awful, prophetic dreams, which I guess being the king of one of the most powerful people in the world, if you think about if God were to start giving anyone prophetic visions and stuff, it would probably be a guy who's fairly up there, like if God had a purpose to accomplish. At least that's the way my mind works. But anyway, so this obviously is different than the dream in chapter 2, because the king remembers the dream, and so he's relating the dream, but again, they can't make the interpretation known. Continuing on, but finally Daniel came in before me, whose name is Belteshazzar, according to the name of my God, and in whom is a spirit of the holy gods. And I related the dream to him, saying, Belshazzar, chief of the soothsayer priests, since I know that pause real quick. he calls him chief of the soothsayer priests. I never realized that Daniel was ever referred to as the chief of the soothsayer priests. I mean, I know I've read this verse a bunch of times before, but it never clicked. Learned something new. So yeah, Belteshazzar, chief of the soothsayer priests, since I know that the spirit of the holy gods is in you, and no secret baffles you, tell me the visions of my dream which I have seen, along with its interpretation. Now these were the visions. So then it seems like, so he doesn't even tell Daniel the dream. He's like, you probably already know the dream, so you tell me the visions of my dream, and also its interpretation. Now these were the visions in my mind as I lay on my bed. I was looking, and behold, there was a tree in the middle of the earth, and its height was great. Oh man, Tolkien reference right there. But anyway, I'm reading the Silmarillion right now. Also, happy April, by the way. I've been meaning to say this. It's not April as I'm recording this. How could it be? But happy April, because this is going to be out in April, and I don't know, you might be watching it later. But anyway. So continuing on, so there's the tree in the middle of the earth, Middle Earth. The tree in the middle of the earth, and its height was great. The tree grew large and became strong, and its height reached to the sky, and it was visible to the end of the whole earth. Its foliage was beautiful, and its fruit abundant, and in it was food for all. The animals of the field found shade under it, and the birds of the sky lived in its branches, and all living creatures fed from it. Again, shout out, like, I forgot, like, how many things in Daniel are very Lord of the Rings-esque. What with kingdoms and visions and dreams and stuff. And then now, like, the king having a vision of a giant tree. And there's I mean, not to get too, and I can't even remember all the names of all this, but there's a lot of tree imagery, and not just like the Ents, the tree people of Middle Earth, but just trees themselves have a lot of symbolism and importance in Tolkien's work and whatnot, and so it's kind of cool to see that a lot of the stuff that Tolkien drew from was actually biblical imagery. I didn't quite realize that, but okay. Excuse me. And all living creatures fed from it. Okay, so we got this big tree. It's awesome tree. Animals of the field are eating from it. All living creatures fed from it. It's like pretty, it's in the center of the earth. It's visible to the end of the whole earth. I mean, it's a dream, so like, can you, it'd be very interesting to have a tree so big that you can see it everywhere when you're on Earth, which, anyway, let's just continue. I was looking in the visions in my mind as I lay on my bed, and behold, an angelic watcher, a holy one, descended from heaven. He shouted out and spoke as follows: Chop down the tree and cut off its branches, shake off its foliage and scatter its fruit, let the animals flee from under it and the birds from its branches, yet leave the stump with its roots in the ground, but with a band of iron and bronze around it, in the new grass of the field, and let him be drenched with the dew of heaven, and let him share with the animals in the grass of the earth. Let his mind change from that of a human, and let an animal's mind be given to him, and let 7 periods of time pass over him. This sentence is by the decree of the angelic watchers, and the decision is a command of the holy ones, in order that the living may know that the Most High is ruler over the realm of mankind, and he grants it to whomever he wishes, and sets over it the lowliest of people. So there's a huge thing. So an angelic watcher, it says, a holy one, descends from heaven and is like violence. Chop down the tree, shake off its foliage, scatter its fruit, animals. So it's like, yeah, which does sound like rather a disturbing dream. I think I would be disturbed if I was having this Tolkien-esque dream of this giant tree, and then an angel comes down with a hacksaw and is like, yeah, we're cutting this down. And anyway, so let's continue, which also, I mean, a bunch of other things. I mean, we're going to get to the interpretation here. But one thing, as you probably know, and I think I mentioned it in an earlier episode, the number 7 is kind of clichely called God's number. It means the number of fullness. So it's like, when it talks about let an animal's mind be given to him, and let 7 periods of time pass over him, it's like a fullness of time, basically. This like complete cycle, I guess. Probably. But again, take everything I say with a grain of salt, and 2 grams of pepper. And maybe some pink Himalayan salt actually too. So let's continue here. This is the dream that I, King Nebuchadnezzar, have seen. Now you, Belteshazzar, tell me its interpretation, since none of the wise men of my kingdom is able to make known to me the interpretation, but you are able because the spirit of the holy gods is in you. So, and again, so this obviously, I mean, it's a different dream. It's a different time. It seems like chronologically this is way after, or maybe not necessarily way after, but it's after Nebuchadnezzar had that first dream where, and he couldn't even remember the dream, and so, what do I want to say here? It's like, essentially, I mean, we see some character growth here, some personal growth for Nebuchadnezzar, because he went from, I mean, sure, it seems like he still has issues here, and we're going to probably get into more of those here, but he at least, you know, he knows and trusts Daniel, and it's through Daniel that God is kind of opening Nebuchadnezzar's eyes to that, you know, God is God, and even though Nebuchadnezzar is like king over, he's the most powerful single human being on earth right there, like he's still not God, basically. Anyway, so let's continue on here. Then Daniel, whose name is Belteshazzar, or Belshazzar, I keep switching it. Don't you just love my my phone is going off with an unknown number? Don't you just love? I just keep switching the way I pronounce the different names. Anyway, then Daniel, whose name is Belteshazzar, was appalled for a while, as his thoughts alarmed him. The king responded and said, Belteshazzar, do not let the dream or its interpretation alarm you. Belteshazzar replied, My lord, if only the dream applied to those who hate you, and its interpretation to your adversaries. And then he gets into it. The tree that you saw, which became large and grew strong, whose height reached to the sky and was visible to all the earth, and whose foliage was beautiful and its fruit abundant, and in which was food for all, under which the animals of the field lived, and in whose branches the birds of the sky settled. Drum roll. It is you, O king, for you have become great and grown strong, and your majesty has become great and reached to the sky, and your dominion to the earth, to the end of the earth. So maybe you kind of picked up on that, but the tree in the dream actually represents Nebuchadnezzar himself. How about that? And in that the king saw an angelic watcher, a holy one, descending from heaven, and saying, Chop down the tree and destroy it, yet leave the stump with its roots in the ground, but with a band of iron and bronze around it. In the new grass of the field, let him be drenched with the dew of heaven, and let him share with the animals of the field until 7 periods of time pass over him. This is the interpretation, O king, and this is the decree of the Most High, which has come upon my lord the king, that you will be driven away from mankind, and your dwelling place will be with the animals of the field, and you will be given grass to eat like cattle, and be drenched with the dew of heaven, and 7 periods of time will pass over you, until you recognize that the Most High is ruler over the realms of mankind, and bestows it on whomever he wishes. And in that it was commanded to leave the stump with the roots of the tree. Your kingdom will remain as yours after you recognize that it is heaven that rules. Therefore, O king, may my advice be pleasing to you. Wipe away your sin by doing righteousness, and your wrongdoings by showing mercy to the poor, in case there may be a prolonging of your prosperity. So, a lot right in there. So, the king's vision was kind of, his dream, semi-figurative, semi-literal. I mean, obviously Nebuchadnezzar is a person. He's not a giant tree, but the tree represents him. But in the vision, it talks about let his mind change from that of human to animal's mind, 7 periods of time passing over. And so Daniel is saying, hey, yeah, you will be driven away from mankind. You're gonna lose your mind, basically, which you can imagine why Daniel would be a little bit hesitant. I mean, thankfully Nebuchadnezzar seems like he's a little bit more, he knows and trusts Daniel now more. But it seemed, I mean, obviously, being the most powerful human on earth, he's probably very rather prideful, as you know, as we all are in different ways. It seems to be C.S. Lewis calls it the great sin, and it seems to be often the thing that every other wrongdoing, and anything wrong that you like really wrong, that is seen in the world, is usually stems from some type of pride from somebody. But uh, so yeah, um, so very interesting here. Now, so basically, Daniel's like Nebuchadnezzar is going to experience this kind of very unideal. He's going to go from the highest of the highest to where he's like lost his mind and he's crawling around like an animal and having an animal's mind and eating grass like cattle, being drenched with the dew of heaven, so like being outside in the rain. And 7 periods of time will pass over you. And so, but that's the other thing too. So 7 times will pass over you until you recognize that the Most High is ruler over the realm of mankind and bestows it on whomever he wishes. And so I wonder, it's like, these 7 periods of time, are they like a specific period, or does it just mean indefinitely? Like, is it a thing that kind of means like forever until, like, you know, going on until he recognizes that the Most High is ruler over the realm of mankind and bestows it on whomever he wishes? So even there, it's like, I mean, okay, so what's the purpose of Nebuchadnezzar, which presumably he's going to go through it, and spoiler alert, he is going to go through it. We're going to get to that here in a minute, but what is the purpose of this? The purpose seems to be to break Nebuchadnezzar's pride, to change him so that he can like stop viewing himself more highly than he should, and viewing himself basically as, oh, there is no one above me, like I am, you know, and so, but anyway, so it's like, really, if you want to think of it this way, it's like God in his mercy is striking down Nebuchadnezzar to destroy his pride. And then also, too, another thing, and in that it was commanded to leave the stump with the roots of the tree, your kingdom will remain as yours after you recognize that it is heaven that rules. So it's like, there's even a promise of like restoration. It's like, hey, you're going to go through this because there's something that you got to learn, and it could take a really long time. It's until you learn this thing, Nebuchadnezzar. But then your kingdom will be restored. It will remain as yours, basically. And then Daniel gives an exhortation to the king. May my advice be pleasing to you. Please listen to what I'm saying. So wipe away your sin by doing righteousness, your wrongdoings by showing mercy to the poor, in case there may be a prolonging of your prosperity. So, yeah. Now let's turn the page and let's see what happens. All right. All of this happened to Nebuchadnezzar the king. So, yep, there we go. Okay. 12 months later, so like a year later, he was walking over on the roof of the royal palace of Babylon. The king began speaking and was saying, "Is this not Babylon the Great, which I myself have built as a royal residence by the might of my power and for the honor of my majesty?" Which, and shout out, a whole year passed, which, and maybe the king kind of heeded Daniel's advice a bit, or at least started to, and then he fell back into things. But still, that's quite a lot of time when you really think about it. I mean, sure, years can fly by, but it's still a full year, 12 months. So then the king obviously is kind of speaking very pridefully here, and continuing, while the word was still in the king's mouth, a voice came from heaven, saying, "King Nebuchadnezzar, to you it is declared, sovereignty has been removed from you, and you will be driven away from mankind, and your dwelling place will be with the animals of the field. You will be given grass to eat like cattle, and 7 periods of time will pass over you until you recognize that the Most High is ruler over the realm of mankind, and bestows it on whomever he wishes." Kind of a reiteration of what Daniel was saying, and so, yeah, and again, the 7 periods of time will pass, so it's like this full, complete thing. That's really interesting, and I wonder if that's sometimes when the Bible uses other phrases to mean like a full, complete, or like eternal, ongoing thing, if like we should think of it as more like, I don't know, indefinite in certain things, because it definitely is an interesting, the whole time dynamic is very interesting about, and the way that people thought about time back then, and even now. So, Immediately the word concerning Nebuchadnezzar was fulfilled, and he was driven away from mankind, and began eating grass like cattle, and his body was drenched with the dew of heaven, until his hair had grown like eagle's feathers, and his nails like birds' claws. That's wild. So, yeah, so it basically kind of lost his sanity, it seems like. He got an animal's mind, he begins eating grass like cattle, and being outside, his body's drenched, and his hair just grows crazy long like eagle's feathers, his nails like bird's claws. Ooh, reminds me of, this kind of disgusting video I saw of someone with crazy long fingernails, like 2 feet long, or, I don't know, maybe that's a bit of an, well, I don't know. Anyway. So, yeah, but at the end of that period, I, Nebuchadnezzar, raised my eyes toward heaven, and my reason returned to me, and I blessed the Most High, and praised and honored him who lives forever. And he continues on here. But, so, shout out Nebuchadnezzar, like, his reason, his sanity returned to him, and what's his response? It's he blesses the Most High, and praised and honored him who lives forever. For his dominion is an everlasting dominion, and his kingdom endures from generation to generation. All the inhabitants of the earth are of no account, but he does according to his will among the army of heaven, and among the inhabitants of earth. And no one can fend off his hand, or say to him, what have you done? Then, well, let's continue on a little bit. Continuing on, at that time my reason returned to me, and my majesty and splendor were restored to me for the honor of my kingdom, and my state counselors and my nobles began seeking me out, so I was reestablished in my sovereignty, and surpassing greatness was added to me. So, yeah, so basically, Nebuchadnezzar kind of comes to his senses, it seems like. And it's interesting that it says that his reason returned to me. It says that twice. So it's like, maybe like, one thing, it was like, his eyes were kind of opened eventually, like some part of like in his animal brain, he was like realizing, wait a minute. That opened a little bit. Then his response was to bless the Most High, meaning God, praising and honoring him who lives forever, and like really humbling himself, it seems like, and really he's like almost like, I see how things are now, like I understand. And then it's like just like that. At that time, it wasn't like a, well, and yeah, it doesn't say how long he was mentally like that, but it wasn't like he humbled himself and then he had to wait another year. It was like he just like that. It says his reason returned to him, and then also his majesty and splendor restored, and surpassing. So he basically got everything back, and also surpassing greatness was added to him. But now also too, like, look at him, like he's now, it seems like Nebuchadnezzar's kind of learned his lesson, so to speak. The lesson that God had for him through a very, like, kind of crazy, and I mean, like, it's a harsh experience, but again, it's kind of necessary. Let's finish up just the very end of the chapter here. So it's I'm kind of finishing up this kind of like letter by Nebuchadnezzar, basically. Now I, Nebuchadnezzar, praise, exalt, and honor the King of heaven, for all his works are true and his ways just, and he is able to humble those who walk in pride. And that's the end of the chapter. Which, shadow that, as far as I know, I might be wrong, but I think this is the last time we hear from like Nebuchadnezzar in at least the book of Daniel, so at the end of chapter 4. And we've kind of got this huge like character shift. I mean, we started off with chapter 1 with Nebuchadnezzar, you know, he invades, like, he invades the Israelites, and so he's like the king of Babylon, and he meets Daniel a little bit, and then it's like through each chapter, like something crazy happens to him or regarding him, and it's like through like these 3 lessons, with first with the dream, the second with the fiery furnace, and now the third one with the dream, and then also losing his mind. It's like it seems like he was really being changed to where he is actually like a better person, basically, at the end of the day, for lack of a better term, through all that. So that is very very interesting, and in all honesty, very hopeful. I mean, you can, I don't know, it can seem like obviously Nebuchadnezzar kind of went through something kind of harsh, which I don't know. When you think about all the harsh things Nebuchadnezzar probably exposed people to, it probably is like, yeah, like if you want to think about, what goes around, what he was dishing out, he's now kind of like receiving back. But still, like, even like with that, I mean, it seems pretty plain that God had a redemptive purpose in Nebuchadnezzar's experience. And again, like at the end, it's like he's definitely seems like a changed man. Like he already seemed like a changed man from the beginning of chapter 4, then from the when we first like heard about him in Daniel, but especially by the end, it's like, yeah, it's so anyway. Shout out! I love seeing the kind of character development of Nebuchadnezzar, and just kind of I mean, and really seeing like God's mercy on like one of the most probably wild, crazy dictators, and who probably did a ton of horrible stuff, but like took it upon himself to like put him through you know situations that would lead him to a change of heart, a change of mind, whatever you want to call it. And so yeah, so thank you for watching. I think we will stop about there for now, and we'll be getting into chapter 5, which itself is going to be wild, I'm sure. The spoiler alert: the first half of the book of Daniel is a bunch of like wild and cool and amazing, accounts of just right, well, we've already, even like what we just saw here with a king losing his mind basically and then being restored. But then the latter half of the book is going to be Daniel's visions and some other stuff too. So looking forward to that. But as of now, stay tuned for chapter 5 next month. And thank you so much for watching, and hopefully you found this enjoyable, inspiring, something in some way. I don't know. If you're watching this and you're still watching it for this long, you probably either like the Bible or you like me or my voice or something. And so thank you for any of that, or both, or all. I can't speak very well. I always say it. I'm always a little tired for some reason anyway. Thank you all so much for watching, and we will see you all again very soon.